Good morning, CSL Carlsbad. My name is Reverend Lori Mack, and it is my honor to be with you here this morning and to give you this morning's message about living in the light. But before we start, let's do what we love to do most, and that's pray. I invite you to close your eyes and go within as I recognize that one presence, that one power, that one essence of love and light and beauty that's always expressing itself in all things. There is no spot where God is not, where I am that essence of love. I am the essence of beauty. I live in the light of the divine spirit. It is closer than my breath. It is nearer than my hands and my feet. And as I know this is my perfect truth, I know this is the perfect truth for each and every person here on this Zoom call, receiving this divine message. I know that this message this morning is riveting. This message is life-changing. This message is the essence of love and light and divine truth. I know that each and every person here opens their heart and their mind and their soul to hear what needs to be heard and to take in what needs to be taken in order to move forward with divine grace in your evolutionary process and spiritual growth. And I'm grateful that we had this time together this morning as I release my word into the law with a full and gracious heart. And so it is. Good morning, Carlsbad. Yes, my heart is full and I am filled with gratitude this morning for each and every one of you. And even though we are still in COVID-19, that we're not in person, we still have this opportunity to connect. We still have this opportunity to realize the truth that we are all one and that we are all interconnected. So this morning I'm talking about living in the light. I'm really excited about my talk, but I was inspired by someone very, very special. Our practitioner, Lynn Guilfoyle, made her transition unexpectedly last week. She had passed from an aneurysm, and yesterday we had her memorial online and it was absolutely beautiful. She was a mother and a grandmother, a wife of 40 years. And she also was a sponsor for many, many people who were in the AA program. But most important, she lived in the light. She lived in a divine knowing, and she was a practitioner of religious science. Even though they moved to Salt Lake City, her and her husband, she still continued to serve CSL Carlsbad, given her wisdom, Facebook posts. I've noticed we have great Facebook posts that Lynn posted for us in managing our Facebook ads. But I knew Lynn from the very beginning when she took foundations class about 7 years ago. Jeff Seckendorf was a practitioner that I knew from North Hollywood, and he was teaching the foundations class, and he needed a TA, a teacher's assistant. I was over at Seaside, and I had heard they needed an assistant for foundations at Carlsbad, so I went over there, and that's pretty much a change in my life. Lynn Guilfoyle and her husband were in the class, and at the end of a foundations class, after you learn the foundational teachings of religious science, you give a project on something that has to do with divine truth. And so her and her husband presented this amazing presentation about radical forgiveness. And she may have been a radical forgiveness coach, I'm not quite sure, but she did practice it. And she taught us about radical forgiveness. And it was truly life-changing for me. And then last year we were at Quest Haven with CSL Carlsbad, and she gave a talk on radical forgiveness there. So I want to share this with you today because it is definitely evolutionary, and it can be life-changing for you when you live in that divine truth, you live in that divine light. In the radical forgiveness world, they believe that what we believe, that there are two worlds that we live in. You believe that you live in the world of humanity, and then you lived in the world of divine truth. Now, the world of humanity is where this is the relative world, that everything that we see with our eyes is what we believe. This is the world that we experience everything with our five senses. This is the world that we experience a lot of change. We've experienced transition, a world that we live in fear, and we believe in life and death. This is a world that we believe that we are a victim of circumstances. Almost like the COVID-19 is a great example when we believe that we are a victim of COVID-19. And then you have the world of divine truth. And the world of divine truth doesn't have a physical form. It is metaphysical. It is beyond the physical. And this kind of carries the energy of eternal life and infinite abundance and love and oneness and goodness. There is no separation. Where in the world of humanity, there's duality. In the world of divine truth, there's only one. And so this is what we are here on planet Earth. This is our life lesson, that we realize that we're not separate from the divine. We're not separate from each other, that we are all one. And to live in this higher state of consciousness, it's a practice of prayer and meditation and sacred reading. And it's also a practice of radical forgiveness, which is an amazing, and I can't wait to tell you more about it. See, in the radical forgiveness world, they believe that before we came to Earth, that we had this divine meeting with all the people that we were going to play out the drama of life with. And we said, okay, now you can be the mother and I'll be the daughter. And when I'm a little girl, you leave me and you abandon me. And then I'll have other people in my life that will come in and abandon me, because I have a lesson to learn. I have a lesson to learn that I am one with all of life, that I am not separate from anything. Or you come into the world and you betray me, and then you go out on me and you betray me. And if I have all these people betray me, it'll be a lesson that I need to learn, that I'm enough, that I am lovable, that I am one with all of life. Because the lesson is always that we are one with all of life and we are perfect just the way we are. And I believe that we even come in and we learn this lesson on a collective consciousness. Like right now, we are learning the lesson with COVID-19, that we are one with all of life. And it's our soul wants to learn this lesson. We're bringing this situation on because we believe that we are separate and we believe in duality. So if we don't learn this lesson through COVID-19, there'll be other opportunities to learn the lesson. But this is like a divine drama that we're living in. It's almost like our soul wants these lessons so we can awaken ourselves to the truth of who we really are. So that life is always purposeful and everything is always done to us for the greater good of who we are and for our soul's growth. We take life that we are always the victim of circumstances, but in radical forgiveness and divine truth, we are never the victim of circumstances, that everything is laid out perfectly for us. So what happens in our life is that we have situations that occur over and over and over and over again. And after we see these patterns, we begin to awaken that maybe I better look at what's happening in my life. So maybe, for an example, a woman named Laura, who has a relationship with a man, and the man leaves her for another woman. But this isn't the first time that it happened. It has happened over and over and over again. So her soul's desire is to learn that she is worthy, that she is enough, that she is lovable. And these people have come into her life to show her where she needs to be healed. Okay, so if there's something within me that I feel like I'm not enough and I feel like I'm not lovable, what happens is a feeling. And so the law of attraction brings the people that we've had agreements in to show me what I believe, that I am not enough. And it is my job to rise above the relative world and to recognize that everything's in divine order and that I am enough and that I am one with all of life. And so we attract these people in our life to show us what needs to be healed within ourselves, and that we are not a victim of circumstances, even though we may feel like a victim of circumstances. So Laura feels like this I'm not enoughness or no one loves me is running in her life, but it is not true. Her false belief of that is running her life. And people are around who are reflecting that in order for her soul to have its soul's growth. So there's two types of forgiveness. There's a regular forgiveness and there's a radical forgiveness. And radical forgiveness, if Laura chooses radical forgiveness, that she sees these people nothing more than angels in the sky, giving her an opportunity to heal her false belief. So in traditional forgiveness, you forgive through willpower. You say, okay, I'm willing to forgive, but I'm not going to forget. You know what I'm saying? Okay, I'm going to forgive you, but I am not going to forget what happens. Now, this is kind of traditional forgiveness, and what happens is that we have a lot of repressed emotions that we keep in our body, and this can bring up a dis-ease in our physical body. And it takes a lot of work to forgive the traditional way, like Jesus taught us. It's how many times, how do I forgive, Jesus? And he said 70 times 7. So it is a repetition so that you can actually embody the presence of forgiveness. But in radical forgiveness, it's completely different. There is nothing to forgive, absolutely nothing. And you can thank that person for helping you to shine light on the false belief that needs to be healed. For Laura, it was like, I am not good enough and I'm not a lovable. And so when she finally, after how many times does it happen over again, that she awakens to this truth and she can rise above it and have her spiritual growth. Because that is why we are here, to have spiritual growth and to move forward in a most divine way. Now, something was brought up. Now, radical forgiveness is by Colin Tippins, and you can find the book online called Radical Forgiveness, or there's also a Radical Forgiveness website that you can go to. So what he says is that what we do is we put people in a prison in our own mind. Yeah. So you might have a prison of your own mind of people that betrayed you. So this is the betrayal prison, and you keep them there. And what happens is our ego wants to stay alive because our ego wants to be right. Do I want to be right or do I want to be happy? No, I want to be right. I'm right and they are wrong. So I am putting them in the prison of my mind. So what happens when we put them in the prison of our mind? Guess who's the prison guard? You're the prison guard, yeah. And how do you keep the prisoner alive? By telling the story over and over and over again. Okay, you're in prison right now because you wronged me and you betrayed me or you abandoned me and you hurt me. I'm not letting you out. Okay, I'll forgive you, but I am not going to forget you. So then when we keep the prisoner in our mind, we have to keep the stories going in order to keep them locked up. So that takes a lot of energy, right? Now, can you imagine if we didn't do that? All that prana energy that we can use for the good in our life to manifest great things and to recognize our wholeness and our oneness with life. But this is our life lesson. This is what we are here to do. We are here to awaken to our true divinity. And by letting those prisoners out of our mind, so last night before I went to bed, I decided to, do I have any prisoners in my mind? And so I lay there and I thought, whoa, I have a lot of prisoners there. And I had no idea I was keeping prisoners in my mind. And so as I thought about that, I decided to let some of them out, many of them out actually, but it wasn't just let them out. Okay, you're free to go. I made sure that I've done the work already around them. And then I was like, well, thank you for, playing your part in the drama, but I no longer need the story in my head. I no longer need the story in my life. I no longer need to have these repressed emotions. And it's just, I think, acceptance, that when we start to accept people for who they are and accept the situation for who they are, we don't have any energy of resistance around it. We just love them for playing their parts. Then we can move forward in our life in a greater way. So I even woke up this morning releasing a couple more prisoners in my mind. And so I think every day I'm going to be releasing prisoners in my mind, because all of a sudden, I don't realize they're there. And I thought, oh no, I think I've been keeping them as a prisoner. I got to release that story. So it just frees your physical body, and it frees more love in your heart and your mind and your soul. Now, in the Navajo tradition, they call this like woundology, like how can we help to move our people forward? And so if you have been betrayed or something happened to you and you needed to do some forgiveness work, they would have the circle of all the Navajo Indians get together, and you can get into the middle of the circle. And you can tell your victim story, and you can cry and scream and yell and hash it out, and everyone's going to listen 100%, be totally present for you and listen for you and have great concern for you. Now, you can only do this 3 times. You're allowed to come into the circle and tell your story 3 times. And on the 4th time, everyone turns their back on you and say, no. Okay, we've heard the story. It's done. It's time to surrender this. It's time to let it go so you can move forward in life. And no one will ever hear your story again. And this is a great spiritual practice. Say, okay, I had the experience. I told my story. I was heard. I was validated. I let go of all my emotions. And now I can move forward in life. And I think that's a beautiful, beautiful practice. Now, Colin Tippin, when he first started this, he worked with people who had cancer because it's known in the medical community that people who have cancer, they hold a lot of repressed feelings. And so he helped them with forgiveness work around it. Even Albert Einstein said that the more elevated your consciousness, the faster you can create change in anything that you focus your attention on. So when you live in the prayer and the meditation and an elevated state of consciousness of divine truth, when you have something like cancer that comes into your life, it is easier to heal by letting that victim archetype go and being in the present moment of radical forgiveness and recognizing there is nothing to forgive, that everyone was just playing their part in the drama of life. So anyways, there's a woman that she had ovarian cancer, and the doctors gave her 3 months to live. Now, her friends paid for her to go to a radical forgiveness retreat. It's not like she wanted to on her own, but during that retreat, she had this amazing opening where she realized that there was something traumatic that happened in her life when she was 2.5 years old. And because of that situation, she believed that she was ultimately worthless. And so she had the opportunity to release her suppressed emotion. And after she got out of there, she was like, wow, I feel fired up. I want to find a naturopathic way of healing. And she knew intuitively that her way to heal would be through prayer. In upstate New York, there was a prayer retreat that she could go to for a week. And during that week, they prayed over her, and she prayed herself with deep feeling of feeling that wholeness and feeling that she is already perfect, whole, and complete in the mind of God. And when she came out, she went and saw her oncologist. And the oncologist said, I don't know how to explain this, but there's absolutely no cancer in your body. So this is the gift of radical forgiveness, that we can release these repressed emotions in our body, and knowing that there is really nothing to forgive in the divine truth, that everyone is just playing their perfect parts, and we are here to move forward. So how do we forgive? First of all, I would say there's the book called Radical Forgiveness by Colin Tippin. And then you can also go to radicalforgiveness.com. And he has these worksheets. And once you start these worksheets, your consciousness begins to move. And I think there's 13 steps, but there's like 5 major steps in the worksheet. And the first step, I'll just go through the 5 major steps. The first step is to tell your victim story. Like, don't even get spiritual or do a spiritual bypass. Just tell it like it is. Like, I'm the victim of circumstances, and this is what they did to me. And just own the victim story. That's step 1. Step 2 is really important because you have to feel the pain. Feel what it feels like to go through what you went through, the anguish, the pain, the hatred, the anger, everything that you felt, and to feel totally and completely. Now, I know us spiritual people tend to like to do a spiritual bypass, we call it. Like, okay, I'm perfect, whole, complete, and all is good. So we don't want to feel the feelings. I think I might be one of them. I'd rather not feel the feelings. I just say, oh, it's all good. It's all great. But, you have to really make sure that you feel the feelings, because you have to authentically go through the pain to get through the peace. I'm not sure if you ever heard it, that when you feel the feeling of the pain that you have in a situation, and you sit down and you give yourself that time to have that experience, what happens is it dissolves into the ethers, and you have this sense of wholeness and peace. I have a story about a man that I met on the Camino that was telling me that he met this girl who was so angry and so upset because her husband gave her the HIV virus. So they went to the mountain of forgiveness, and he sat with her for 2 hours there, and she cried and she yelled and she screamed and she got out all of her repressed emotions. And by the time that she finished the Camino weeks later, she had no energy around it. She really practiced that radical forgiveness without realizing what she was doing, and recognizing that he was a gift in her life. And so the whole thing for her to have a completely healing is to get out the repressed emotions. So that is step 2. And then step 3 is when you collapse the story, where you have a little broader vision of the story. You can say, okay, what happened here again? What was my false belief around this situation? How has this story kept me stuck in the victim archetype? And this is the time when you kind of take back your power, and you allow the story to die in your life. And also the time where you can exercise compassion for the other person who divinely played that role for you to wake up. And then the 4th part, and this is the radical forgiveness way of healing instead of the traditional way of forgiveness, that you would see this as an spiritual experience. You would see this, that everything was in divine order and everything was perfect for your spiritual healing. And so this is a step that you actually surrender, and you step into this transformational place, and we see the divine perfection in all of life. And that is step 4. And then step 5 is the time where you actually integrate this into your heart, your mind, your body, and your soul. And sometimes it might take time to integrate, but it's the willingness. I'm willing to do it. I might not be ready, but I'm willing. When you have that willingness attitude, eventually what happens, you're no longer suppressing this on a cellular level, and you can live in the divine truth that it was all perfect. But you have to be ready for that. But it's good just even to do the worksheets when you're not ready, because he has worksheets that help you move through this, because it begins the wheel turning. It begins the engine going. So when you transform energy of disharmony, it is about recognizing that you accept everything that happens, accepting people, accepting the situation, living in peace and living in harmony, refusing to see people as the victim or as a villain, recognizing that we are people and we are just living out the life drama. And people are helping us to heal by recognizing what false belief is playing in me, that I keep on bringing these situations and these people in my life. So it is a divine awakening. One of the radical forgiveness coaches, her name was Mary, she came down with colon cancer. And the doctors told her she had stage 3. They wanted to do an operation on her right away. And she said, absolutely not. She said, give me 30 days. And she went off to the mountains for 30 days. And in 30 days, she had a cabin there. And she spent time working on herself. She spent time in the cabin praying with deep, abiding feelings and meditating and doing her radical forgiveness worksheets and really going through the dark night of the soul and feeling all those those feelings that need to be felt so she could move through them. And then when she came home, the doctors, of course, were amazed that she only had a little bit of cancer left. So her cancer treatment was little, but she healed quickly, because you have that consciousness, that higher consciousness that you're taking with you in your healing. So it's easier to heal when you are experiencing that. Another thing that I love about the radical forgiveness is they really believe in the power of prayer like we do. And they believe that it's the feeling that creates the deal when you pray with deep, abiding feeling. So you're not praying to be peaceful. You're not praying to have health. You are praying to experience peace within your heart, your mind, your body, your soul. You're praying to be to experience perfection, to experience wholeness, to have the feeling of that. And when we pray with feelings, this is where the power of the healing comes. And it works in the opposite direction. Like we have that feeling that we're not enough. This is where all these people come into our life magnetically through the law of attraction to show us what our false beliefs are, that we are not enough, that we're not worthy, and that we are not whole. But we pray that feeling of wholeness, that I am enough, that I am one with God, that I am lovable. This is where the healing comes also, but it's all around the feeling of it. And so one of my favorite authors around the feeling of prayer is Greg Braden. He wrote a book, called The Lost Mode of Prayer. And he says, when we know beyond any doubt that we already speak the feeling language of prayer, we awaken that part of us that can never be stolen, lost, or taken away. This is the secret mode of prayer. And how beautiful that is. So when we decide to live in the light, and I just want to thank Ling Guilfoyle for being a light in the world and for sharing this amazing spiritual practice with me, and so I can share it with you. But when we live in this light, we have to be willing to practice radical forgiveness. The whole thing, are you willing to forgive? But are you willing to radically forgive? I know that at one time when I had betrayal in my life, I was like, okay, I'm willing to forgive. I can't do it right now, but I'm willing to do it. So then I finally forgave, but there was a part of me that said, I forgive, but I don't forget. I had them in prison in my mind. So I'm the one that had to pay for it, because I had to spend the time being the prison guard, telling the story over and over in my mind. So it's like, okay, Lori, they were here for a divine purpose. You already know that. So now you can let them out of prison. And when you find out, when you're releasing them from prison, you're releasing yourself from prison. But it's all willingness to see that life is in perfect order. And there's always a divine plan, a willingness to do the work to heal your false beliefs that you have running in the background of your subconscious mind. I mean, you have to do the work, and willingness to see others in the drama of life as divine angels assisting you to your greater good by living in the light. Yeah, it sounds easy, doesn't it? But it's worth the work. It's always worth the work, the spiritual work that you have to do to get to the other side. I just want to share with you a very sweet little story about a couple who gave birth. And they already had a three-year-old child at home, and they took the baby home, and they wanted to include the 3-year-old child in the celebration. And the three-year-old child insisted on having time alone with the baby. And this kind of perturbed the parents. So they put the baby in the crib, and they left the room, and they kept the baby monitor on. And they heard the 3-year-old child say, "Baby, tell me about God. I'm beginning to forget." How sweet. So let's pray. That's what we do most here, and that's what we love to do. And this is, we know, is the healing presence of God that is all around us. I invite you to close your eyes and to go within. As I recognize that one power, that one presence, I recognize that essence of love and light that's always flowing through the ethers, through life, through each and every situation. I recognize that I am one with this divine light, this living light of love and beauty. I recognize that this is my perfect truth. And as this is my perfect truth, this is perfect truth for each and every person here on this call. I know and recognize that The drama of life is always happening, and it is all in divine, perfect order. I know for each and every person here, they open their heart, their mind, their soul to practice radical forgiveness, to allow themselves to move past the relative world and into the world of divine truth. I know for us as a collective whole with the COVID-19, that we are willing to awaken to the truth of who we are, that we are all one, and that we are all interconnected in the mind of God. And I just give great gratitude for my friend Lynn Guilfoyle, that she moves into the eternal with divine peace, with love, with grace, with beauty, and with joy. And that we will always keep her in our hearts, our minds, and our souls. And I'm grateful for this lesson that she has taught me in my life so I can share it with you. And how beautiful this is. My heart is overfilled with gratitude, overfilled with joy of the divine truth operating through all and as all, as I release my word into the law, knowing that it is good and it is done. And so it is. I love you. Stay safe.